Hello and welcome. My name is Tsuki, and welcome to my guide to the White Mage, one of the three healers currently in Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward. It has seen some changes to a handful of their abilities since A Realm Reborn, but remains the more traditional healer of the three, having multiple healing spells and abilities to fit outgoing damage. It is still a solid healer, having gained new abilities to increase the White Mage's healing and DPSing capabilities. Each of the 5 new abilities have clear and strong uses, and the White Mage roll from 50 to 60 doesn't change all too much, but there are always new things to learn and keep in mind as we continue moving forward as healers. As you are watching, please keep in mind that this guide will be filled with my own personal opinions and styles of healing, so remember that you do not always have to agree with me, but you should still hopefully be able to take what you learned here and apply it to your own gameplay. My goal is to help newer players looking at the White Mage to get a good understanding of their abilities and what roles they should be fulfilling, as well as helping current White Mages look at expanding what they can do to add to their party in general, and both in terms of support and damage. This guide will also contain plenty of tips for healers, so if you are a scholar or astrologian, you can hopefully take what you learned here and try to apply it to your own spells as well. Personally, I find healers as the most difficult role of the three to play and master, as they hold the majority of the responsibility and burden of the entire party as a whole, but I'll go more in depth with that later. For now, let's just get started with the actual guide. First off, I'd like to go through all the abilities that the White Mage has access to. As I said before, a handful of their older abilities have been changed a bit, and each ability here will be listed as if you are already level 60 and have access to the best form of each ability, but this still can be helpful to keep in mind as you are still leveling. Stone deals earth damage with a potency of 140 and adds a 40% heavy effect on the target that lasts for 20 seconds. If Stones 2 is unavailable due to a level sync or just because you haven't leveled up enough and unlocked it yet, this will be your choice for dealing damage after your damage over time effects are up on the target. While you will find better spells for dealing damage, Stone will still keep its relevance for its utility to heavy targets and slow their movement speed. Cure restores the target's HP with a potency of 400. This will be your bread and butter as a White Mage, and will be your go-to spell for healing party members who have taken a small to moderate amount of damage. Casting this will also have a 15% chance to proc a Cure 2 that will cost no MP, so really you should try to use Cure as much as you can unless you absolutely need something stronger to keep up with the outgoing damage. Arrow deals wind damage with a potency of 50, and adds a damage over time effect of 25 potency every 3 seconds for 18 seconds. Total potency is 200. This is also an instant cast spell. Use this alongside your stone spells for single target damage. Cleric Stance is a permanent buff that when switched on will swap your intelligence and mind stats while increasing the potency of all your damaging abilities by 10% and reducing the potency of your healing abilities by 20%. This is a very important ability as it allows you to deal decent damage while active and keep your healing capabilities close at hand at the switch of a single button. Learning how to properly move in and out of this stance to deal damage and still fulfill your healing duties is what will make you an amazing healer. In Final Fantasy XIV, DPSing is something you should be trying to find opportunities to do as a healer, as it will make fights and dungeon runs much faster, make meeting DPS requirements on certain high-end encounters easier to achieve. After turning on Cleric Stance, you must wait 5 seconds before you can turn it off again. So if you know that you will have to cast heals within the next 5 seconds, you should not turn this on. Also, when turning off Cleric Stance, if you are spamming the button, it is very possible to turn it off and immediately turn it back on if you're not careful. So do not mash this button. I will go more in depth about dealing damage as a healer later in this guide, so let's move on for now. Protect is a defensive buff that will be cast on you and all party members around you for 30 minutes. It increases the physical and magical defense of everyone it hits. It should go without saying that this should be casted on everyone before a dungeon or fight begins and should be kept up throughout the rest of the run, assuming it lasts for longer than 30 minutes. As for recasting this on party members who have died and been revived mid-combat, it is a judgment call on your part, as doing so will cost even more MP than you have already burned reviving them in the first place. A good thing to make note of is that prior to Heavensward, White Mage's Protect was the only one to contain the increased magical defense due to their Pro Shell trait. The Pro Shell trait has been removed and now the magical defense has been built into the ability itself. meaning that a Scholar, Astrologian, or Paladin can cast Protect with the same effect as a White Mage. This is a welcome change, and to compensate, White Mages have been given a so-so enhanced Medica trait, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Medica restores the HP of you and everyone around you with a potency of 300. This is good for when small to moderate amount of AoE damage hits the party, or when multiple party members have taken damage. It is also good if you have casted Medica 2 prior and believe you need the extra instant healing power of a Medica to ensure no one dies during high AoE damage moments. As I said earlier, Medica received a small trait and this now has a 20% chance that the casted Medica will cost half MP. Now, this means that the current Medica you are casting has the chance to cost half MP. It does not proc your next Medica to do so, meaning unless you are paying very close attention to your MP, you probably won't even notice if this effect actually triggers. But if it does, it is a very small way of saving MP, so while it is pretty lackluster, you can't complain about some MP saved. Raise will revive a dead party member in a weakened state that reduces all of that player's stats by 15% for 2 minutes. If they die with this weakness and are revived again, they will get a Brink of Death status, which reduces all stats by 30%. My view on reviving dead party members has not really changed much since A Realm Reborn. If someone ever dies during a fight or encounter and needs a raise, it is because something somewhere went wrong, whether it was because proper mitigation and healing was not used by the tanks and healers, or if certain mechanics were not dealt with properly. Whatever the reason, it takes a pretty big mistake to cause a death. Raising a dead party member takes a lot of resources. At level 60, it costs about 2,650 MP to cast. That is a lot of MP. On top of that, due to the long cast time, you'll probably want to use it swift casts to cast it instantly, a very important and versatile tool that could be better utilized elsewhere. As mentioned before, the person revived will have the weakened status and will only have a small portion of HP, TP, and MP to get them back into the fight. Should a party member die and you do decide to raise them, you better make sure you're also willing to make sure they don't die again. Otherwise, it will just be a complete waste of your own resources and set the party back even more. If you're not confident that you can raise and keep the party member alive, do not do so until you have gained the proper control and security to do so. Fluid Aura is an off-the-global cooldown ability that deals water damage with a potency of 150 that knocks back and binds the target for 6 seconds. The cooldown is 30 seconds, it is instant cast, and you must also be within melee range to cast. This ability can be a great tool for dealing extra damage while soloing. However, in a dungeon or instance, you'll really want to use this ability only on select enemies who will be immune to the knockback effect. Otherwise, you'll knock the enemy out of range of the tank and melee DPS, and essentially make them lose more DPS than the small amount you would gain by using it. Thankfully, most bosses are immune to this, and typically large enemies such as Dolahans and dragons are also immune. As long as the target is immune to the knockback, getting in range to cast this when it is off cooldown is basically free damage with no cast or MP. However, there are select times when the knockback effect can come in handy, such as knocking a caster type enemy into range of the tank so their AoE and melee abilities will hit it. But mostly, you'll just be using this for the free damage. Asuna removes a single detrimental effect from a target. There is also a 20% chance that your next Asuna will cost no MP. Now, remember that just because a debuff is on a party member does not mean you need to jump up immediately to get rid of it. There are certainly high priority debuffs that do need to be taken care of as soon as possible, but others can be left to wear off on their own as they will not affect the party member or hinder them enough to warrant the cast and MP. Things like weak poisons can be healed through, other effects do not have a long enough duration and will wear off soon enough anyway, and some effects cannot even be dispelled. As a healer, make sure to keep note of important debuffs that do need immediate attention, and those that aren't too hindering or cannot be dispelled. Stone 2 deals earth damage with a potency of 170. If you do not need the heavy debuff of stone, then you should be using Stone 2 for filler damage when you don't have damage over time effects to reapply to single targets. This is also assuming you are below level 54 and don't have access to Stone 3 yet. Repose will sleep a target for 30 seconds. I barely use this ability. If you are having to sleep mobs during trash pulls to help keep the tank alive, then that means you or your tank is doing something seriously wrong. MP should be better spent dealing damage and killing enemies faster than sleeping targets. The only viable times to use repose are on the ad of Brayflock's long stop, if a non-tank pulls an enemy and the tank is not paying attention to pull them off, or if you want to be lazy when doing beckon leaves. Seriously though, there's almost no good use for this ability, just Cleric stance and DPS. Cure 2 restores a target's HP with a potency of 650. This is not a replacement for Cure at all. This should only be used in special occasions when someone has taken a moderate to large amount of damage and needs the bigger heal to reduce the risk of dying. Cure 2 costs double the MP to cast than Cure does, and will do 150 potency less healing than casting 2 cures. So, I must stress, use this only when it is needed. Using only Cure 2 will be a surefire way to deplete your MP fast. Conserving and managing your MP is still really important as a white mage. Note that Cure 2 also has a 15% chance to proc a Cure 3 that costs half MP, although this is almost never helpful at all. Presence of Mind is a buff that will increase your attack speed by 20% for 15 seconds. This sits on a 150 second cooldown. This cooldown is amazing. It can be used both as a healing and DPSing cooldown to either throw out more heals or damaging spells at a faster rate. This is great for catching up on heals when you have to throw out a lot of single target heals to multiple people, or just on a single target. Using this on large trash pulls with your AoE damaging abilities will also allow you to squeeze in more damage before having to jump out a Cleric stance to catch up on heals. This is a very well-rounded cooldown with many uses, and I love it. Stone Skin is a defensive buff that will absorb 10% of a target's maximum HP before it is broken. Stone Skin will last for 30 minutes or until it is broken. Also, since this is based off a target's maximum HP, this does scale with the target you are casting it on, rather than your own gear. In an instance, it is good practice to have this casted on all party members before each pull, although that is not always necessary. At the very least, try to make sure that each party member has a fresh Stone Skin before each boss, and that the tank has one for each pull. While in combat, you don't want to use this too much as it costs the same amount of MP to cast as Cure 2. However, this can be a great tool for reducing big spike damage or keeping players with weakness or less gear alive during high damage phases. In Heavensward, Stone Skin has seen a pretty big change for white mages. Before, in A Realm Reborn, white mages received the Granite Skin trait that increased Stone Skin's effectiveness to absorb 18% of the target's maximum HP, instead of 10%. That trait has now been replaced with Quick Stone Skin, which shortens Stone Skin's base cast time to 2.5 seconds, a whole half-second difference. So, hooray! Yeah, I pretty much consider this a nerf to Stone Skin, and one that I found completely unnecessary since both Scholar and Astrologian have the option of applying Stone Skin with their shields. But, you know, whatever. Regen is an instant cast ability that places a healing over time effect on the target that heals for 150 potency every 3 seconds for 21 seconds, with a total potency of 1050. As you can imagine, Regen is your strongest single target heal other than Benediction, and it costs much less MP than Cure 2 does. Using this on a tank or any party member who will be taking constant damage is always a solid choice. Since the large healing potency of Regen is spread out, you shouldn't have to worry too much about the Regen takes overhealing and increasing amnesty during a fight. Although if a tank is moving to pull to the next stress pack or is picking up adds during a phase shift with Regen, it is possible to gain aggro, so try to be careful during those situations. Otherwise, this is a great spell and it should be one of your best tools for healing and conserving MP. Shroud of Saints will have your current enmity and add a refresh effect with a potency of 80 for 15 seconds. Now, the refresh effect does not scale with your MP pool at all, but it does scale with your level. At level 60, I believe someone calculated it out to restore 402 MP every 30 seconds, for a total of 2010 MP. Now, both effects of Shroud are important. However, more often than not, you'll want to use this as soon as your MP drops low enough to regain all the MP from the refresh, without wasting any, and then use it periodically as it comes off cooldown to regain the MP, and constantly have your enmity throughout the fight. However, there may be times, such as during ad phases, where you might still have to do heavy healing, and saving this to have your enmity during those times can definitely save you from dying. Otherwise, I personally try to use it more for this refresh effect, and just take the enmity decrease as a bonus. Divine Seal is a buff that will increase your healing potencies by 30% for 15 seconds. This has a 60-second cooldown. This ability is amazing. This is great for increasing the effectiveness of your cures and regens, as well for catching up on heals. This makes Medica 2 even better, and since it sits on such a short cooldown, you should be able to use this at least once per pull easily. You shouldn't be too stingy with this ability, although saving it for certain high damage phases or mechanics is always a great idea. Cure 3 restores the HP of the target and all party members around the target with a cure potency of 550. Now, a common mistake that a lot of newer white mages tend to make is that they'll see Cure 3 and instantly think it is a better single target heal than Cure 2, which is not the case because Cure 3 is an AoE heal. Now, the radius of Cure 3's effect is pretty small, so using this is really only viable if you're stacked really close together. Also, it costs a lot more MP than Medica 2 does, heals for less, but will heal for more upfront. So you only should use this if you need the instant HP to survive more upcoming damage that Medica 2's regen can't heal up on its own pace. Also, even if you cast Cure 2 and get the proc that halves the cost of Cure 3, it is still less healing potency per MP to cast Cure 3, even if it costs half MP. So it is not viable for single target healing at all, so don't use it for single target healing. Holy deals damage in an AoE around you with a potency of 200 and stuns all nearby enemies for 4 seconds. Now, this spell has seen a pretty big nerf since A Realm Reborn. Now, the first target you hit with Holy will receive the full 200 potency attack, but the second will receive 10% less, the third 20% less, the fourth 30% less, the fifth 40% less, and all remaining targets will be hit for only 50% potency. This is a pretty big damage loss, but it is still an amazing AoE damaging ability nonetheless. Using this on large packs of trash mobs or enemies during speedruns is a great way to help speed things up. Also, because of the stun effect, it can act as a form of damage mitigation for a few seconds. Keep in mind that this is an effect around you, so you have to get in range of all the targets and expose yourself to possible close range cleaves and AoEs. Also, Holy costs a lot of MP to cast, so never burn all of your MP casting this ability. Your main priority is always to keep your party alive, so never overdo it and run out of MP to cast your heals. Arrow 2 deals wind damage with a potency of 50 and adds a damage over time effect that deals 50 potency every 3 seconds for 12 seconds. Total potency is 250. This is another great damage over time effect to apply alongside Arrow for using your filler stone spells for single target damage. Medica 2 will restore the HP of you and all party members around you with a potency of 200 and adds a healing over time effect of 50 potency every 3 seconds for 30 seconds for a total potency of 700. This is your strongest AoE heal, and my is it awesome. While the regen effect of Medica 2 can ultimately top people off and start overhealing, it is an amazing tool for dealing with high AoE damage or constant AoE damage. It will become crucial to know when casting this is not a good idea, however. This can generate a lot of enmity, and while you shouldn't need this anywhere near the beginning of a pull, ads can spawn and flock to you from all the healing this spell can do. However, it is a 700 potency heal overall. If large damage goes out and you cast this, don't be afraid if everyone isn't topped up immediately. This is a regen spell. Let the regen effect do its work if you know your party won't need their full HP to survive another large spike in damage anytime soon. It is also worth mentioning that Medica 2 has an increased radius of 20 yalms instead of the standard 15 yalms of other AoE healing spells, so this is another great thing about this amazing spell. Stone Skin 2 applies Stone Skin to all party members around you. It has a considerably longer cast time than Stone Skin and also cannot be casted in combat, so this is merely for preparing for a pull. Benediction instantly restores all of a target's HP and sits on a 5-minute cooldown. This is the strongest heal in the game, but remember that there is a difference between being the strongest and being best. The long 5-minute cooldown definitely keeps this spell from being the best. However, there are special things to know about Benediction. As of Heavensward, it is now the only healing ability in the game that does percentage healing, meaning that it is the only heal that can bypass things that lower your outgoing heals, such as Cleric stance, or that lowers your target's incoming heals, such as disease or infirmity. That being said, its only weakness is its insanely long cooldown of 5 minutes. This spell can be used as a planned low HP heal to save MP or catch up on healing. This can also be used as your panic button for healing someone who took unexpected damage and is near death and needs large heals immediately to survive incoming damage. Note that while it is instant cast, there is a slight delay before the heal actually registers, so try and cast this a split second sooner than you would think to if you were using it in a planned fashion, or you run the risk of your target dying and you putting the heal on cooldown regardless. And now we move on to the 5 new abilities the White Mage received in the expansion. The first is Asylum, which places a ground AoE similar to Sacred Soil that heals all targets inside with a regen potency of 100 every 3 seconds for 24 seconds. Total potency is 800 and it sits on a 90-second cooldown. Now of course, since this is placed on the ground, you'll want to avoid using this unless you're certain that whoever you're trying to heal will be able to stand in its effect for at least most of its duration. Something to keep in mind, since this is a healing ability and not a healing spell, certain buffs will not work to improve its effectiveness. For instance, Divine Seal will not increase its potency, and a Warrior in Defiance will not be healed more than anyone else standing in it. Asylum is, however, affected by Cleric Stance, so make sure not to place it down with Cleric Stance up. Stone 3 deals earth damage with a potency of 210. Pretty self-explanatory, use this instead of Stone 2 whenever it's available. Assize deals unaspected damage to all nearby enemies with a potency of 300, restores the HP of you and all party members around you by 300 potency, and restores 10% of your maximum MP. This sits on a 90-second cooldown. Wow, Assize is definitely my favorite ability out of the 5 new ones. It has 3 great effects, although because of the use or lack of use of Cleric Stance, you'll really only get to fully utilize 2 of the 3 effects. No matter what, you always get the 10% MP, which is amazing. It then becomes a matter of if you want the 300 potency AoE damage or AoE heal. Personally, I tend to value the damage more, since I can just cast a normal Medica and receive the same healing effect, but I can't get a 300 potency AoE damage from any one of my other abilities. But you do have a choice between the 2. If you use it without Cleric Stance, you'll get the full heal and a crappy damage effect, but it is still a slight amount of damage nonetheless. And in Cleric Stance, you'll get the full damage and a crappy heal. Either way, it's still a great ability. Note again, since this is an ability, it is unaffected by things such as Divine Seal and Defiance for the healing potency. Arrow 3 will deal wind damage with a potency of 50 to a target and all targets around it, and also apply a damage over time effect that deals 40 potency over 3 seconds for 24 seconds. Total potency is 330. This is a pretty awesome AoE ability. This allows White Mage to be competitive to Scholars and their Bane now with the use of Arrow 3, Assize, and Holy. This is really awesome to apply on multiple targets and trash packs, but it is also great on single targets as well. And the final White Mage ability is Tetragrammaton. I'm just gonna call it Tetra from now on. This is an instant cast healing ability that restores a target's HP with a potency of 700. This ability is awesome. Using it on cooldown can help catch up on healing or help conserve MP. You can cast this while moving, and it can act as a soft panic button instead of burning Benediction. This ability is also an awesome and welcome addition to the White Mage's toolkit, as they lack reliable instant cast heals while moving. However, again, this is an ability, so it is unaffected by things such as Divine Seal and Defiance. And now we should talk about cross-class abilities and which ones you should use. Even though we've leveled another 10 levels, we still only have access to 5 cross-class abilities, although in the case of White Mage, there are still only 5 ones that have any real use to us anyway. White Mage can take cross-class abilities from Arcanist and Thaumaturge. From Arcanist, they can take Ruin, Physic, Virus, and Eye for an Eye. From Thaumaturge, they can take Surecast, Blizzard 2, and Swiftcast. Ruin and Physic are completely useless to you, as you already have your own abilities that do the same things or more effectively. Virus will reduce a target's strength and dexterity by 15% for 10 seconds, and sits on a 90-second cooldown. After the effect of Virus wears off, the target will also receive a 60-second immunity from receiving another Virus effect. This ability is great for reducing big spike damage that is physical. However, keep in mind that Scholars and Summoners have access to Enhanced Virus, which will also reduce the target's intelligence and mind for magical attacks. Eye for an Eye will place a 30-second buff on a party member. Whenever the buffed party member is hit, the enemy who hit them will have a 20% chance to be debuffed and deal 10% less damage for 20 seconds. This has a 180-second cooldown. This is great to place on the tank when they are taking multiple mobs as it has more chances to trigger, but it can also be decent on boss fights. This is an RNG ability however, so there is still a chance that it will never trigger, so be prepared for full damage to still be going out. Sure Cast will ensure that your next cast will finish uninterrupted. This sits on a 30-second cooldown. Taking certain damaging attacks can sometimes interrupt your cast. Preemptively using this cooldown before casting important spells will make sure you can keep a step ahead of the encounter. However, many healers and casters, myself included, end up using this ability a lot less than we should be. You'll find that you'll only notice when you may be at threat of being interrupted when you are already mid-cast. But, in more difficult content, learning where you could be interrupted and using this to stay on top of your heals will make you a better healer. Blizzard 2 deals 50 potency ice damage in the area around you and binds targets hit for 8 seconds. There really is no reason to ever use this ability, but there really is no other viable option for your 5th ability. The bind could have some uses, but other jobs also have their own binds, so really, the only decent place to use this could be in PvP. But I don't really do PvP, so I guess I wouldn't really know. And Sure Cast allows you to instantly cast any spell. This sits on a 1-minute cooldown and is absolutely mandatory for healing anything seriously. Swift Cast can be used to cast any clutch spell, be cast while moving, and sadly, the most famous use is to be raising dead party members. With white mages in particular, it is also very common to Swift Cast Stone Skin 2 in between pulls. Again, if you want to heal anything seriously, this ability is absolutely mandatory. And those are the class abilities that I recommend. In order to get access to all of these abilities, you will need to level Arcanist to 34 and Thaumaturge to 26. As you are leveling, you shouldn't worry too much about cross-class abilities, but once you start getting into level 50 content, you should consider taking the time to make sure you level up those alternate classes for them, as they will widen your toolkit. There are 2 important things to touch up on now before we get into healing techniques, and those are Overhealing and Precasting. Overhealing is just what it sounds like, healing for more HP than the missing HP of the target. As a white mage especially, looking at the damage taken and the missing HP of a party member and choosing the right heal to heal the damage without going overboard is very vital to the job. For example, if a tank is missing 2000 HP and you cast Cure 2 and heal him for 5000, that is 3000 HP you just overhealed. That is more enmity that you just generated, which can be dangerous at the start of a pull or if ads are spawning. And it is also a waste of your MP, since in this scenario, only 40% of your MP casting that Cure 2 would have actually been used, when you alternatively could have casted Cure or a Regen and let the healing over time effect top the tank up. You will probably overheal at times, but you should really learn how to gauge damage and try to limit it as best as possible. Precasting is the act of preemptively casting a healing spell to deal with damage you know or suspect is coming. Doing this will hopefully allow the damage to be taken sometime in the middle of your cast time, and the heal should land a moment later after the damage is taken. This will allow you to deal with the damage as soon as possible instead of waiting and seeing the damage go out before starting to cast. A lot of the time, an enemy's cast bar or model will begin performing a telltale animation to signal when large hits will be coming. Timing your heals to do this is a good way of showing your mastery of your healing role. This can also be used for damaging abilities, such as casting Arrow 3 while the tank is moving in to pull the boss, so it lands as soon as the tank's ranged aggro ability has landed, allowing you more damage uptime. Learning how to precast will be a great tool in keeping up with heals and maximizing damage. And now we can move on to actually healing and the techniques that I personally use. Now you should keep in mind that healing is done on a case-by-case basis, and your experience healing one piece of content will never really be the same as the last, especially if you're moving in and out of groups and DF matches, getting different people each time. You won't really know how well the tank uses their cooldowns, or if the DPS is high enough to skip phases and end fights sooner, or if anyone will take avoidable damage. Being a healer will require lots of perception, and you cannot tunnel vision on any one task. You'll need to learn to keep an open mind and a watchful eye on the whole situation to get a good grasp on how the fight is currently progressing and where it may soon lead, as well as each individual in your party. Keep an eye on your tank and see what cooldowns they're using, and if they are currently in their tanking or DPS stance, and this should help you decide how much healing they may need soon. Is the off tank about to pick up ads? In which case, soon you will need to give him some of your attention, as well as watch your heals to not pull the ads to yourself. Are the DPS handling the mechanics they're supposed to handle? And if they are, do those mechanics cause them to take any damage? Or if they aren't, will more damage be going out because of that? Is the boss casting a big damaging ability? Or is nothing of particular importance happening, and there's no real damage about to go out? In which case, you can jump into Cleric stance and toss out some extra damage. My preferred style and technique of healing is a balance of being safe but also aggressive, making sure no one dies while also finding good opportunities to deal damage. My personal mindset on my role as a healer is to ensure that no one dies and that no one is hindered by any detrimental effects. That's it. No, it is not to make sure everyone's HP bars is full at all times. Yes, sometimes a party member should have a full HP bar to ensure that they can survive possible incoming damage, but if they don't need the HP, then you can get away with stalling your heals in favor of dealing more damage or healing a different target of higher priority. Regardless, if a party member is at 100% HP or 10% HP, they still have their full capabilities as long as they are not completely killed. Now, leaving your party members at partial HP is something that you can learn to do as you grow familiar with the fight and have a better perception and foresight to see where the fight will likely be going. This will allow you to stay in Cleric stance longer and deal more damage. Of course, as a newer healer, you may want to take as little risk as possible, but like I said, while I can be aggressive as a healer, I know my limits and know when I should heal. Your main priority and role is that of a healer, so if you're a person who thinks it is acceptable to burn all of your MP spamming holy and have a sliver of it left to heal, then you're being very reckless and irresponsible. Granted, even though a lot of responsibility falls on you as the healer to ensure everyone makes it through a fight, it is still a team effort, and your trust and reliability in your party may cause you to play more aggressively or safe. I, for instance, trust the people in my free company, and therefore do more damage while playing with them than I would if I were playing with a random group in the Duty Finder. Learn at a gradual pace what you're most comfortable with, and don't be afraid to take acceptable risks. Yes, you will make bad calls and mistakes, but it is all part of the learning process. Now, for single target healing, the first thing I like to do is make sure that at least this tank has stone skin before the pull, whether this be trash or a boss fight. This will allow them to generate and secure more enmity before I even have to cast my first heal. Next, I will gauge how much damage the tank is taking, what cooldowns they used, if any, and how much more damage they should be taking. Assuming they are taking a moderate amount of damage, I will begin casting a cure or cure 2, and then try to follow it up with a regen. If I feel the regen will be enough to handle the current incoming damage for a while, I'll usually turn on Cleric stance to deal damage, and then it becomes a game of reading the damage the tank is taking and responding with the proper heal, and switching in and out of Cleric stance when needed. Towards the end of a pull, when the last enemy is about to die, I also try to cast Stone Skin so that it is up and ready for the next pull, as most tanks will not wait for you to cast this on them before each pull each time. As you can imagine, this is really where a White Mage's new quick Stone Skin trait really shines. Something to keep in mind is that while the tank has a lot of responsibility to use their defensive cooldowns properly when needed, you also have your own healing cooldowns if they don't use anything, or have none available. Divine Seal is amazing, especially on regen, and should be used once per pull easily. Presence of Mind can help deal with huge spikes of damage. Asylum can add a little more regen healing, and Ascites can be used for AoE healing, preferably damage though, and Tetra and Benediction can be used to catch up on heals, and be stingy on your Cleric stance uptime. Now, while the tank should be taking the majority of the damage in any situation, DPS will also need healing depending on the fight mechanics and their own ability to dodge, which we all know by now they can be quite terrible at doing. In the case that someone other than the tank takes damage, you will need to start making judgment calls. Here's where having that perception and foresight will really come in handy, as you will need to gauge on what damage will be coming next, who needs the heals to survive it, or if you even need to worry about healing anyone at all. The first thing to consider is how the damage was taken, whether if it was mechanic based or because someone took avoidable damage. If it was mechanic based, will that mechanic happen again soon and need to be dealt with again, in which case the people dealing with the mechanic will need their missing HP. If it was avoidable damage, as negative as it may sound, you will need to start keeping a closer eye on that person and learn not to trust them as much and give them extra attention. Whatever the reason, being lag or lack of skill or lack of understanding of the fight, that person is more likely to take that damage again, so you need to be prepared for when it happens. Now, regardless on if the damage taken was avoidable or not. If lots of damage starts going out, and you begin needing to focus heal other targets than the tank, it soon becomes a balancing act to make sure that everyone doesn't die and has the proper HP they need to survive future damage. Regens can work wonders on targets who won't need all their HP instantaneously, or to be kept on the tank so that it can still offset some of the damage while you target other party members. If everyone starts taking damage, or just if unavoidable AoE damage occurs, this is when you need to start considering your AoE healing abilities. You now have 5 different tools for healing damage in an AoE. 2 of them are abilities from the expansion, Asylum and Assize. Asylum can be used for single target healing, but it best shines while healing damage the whole party is taking. This can be a good support heal for everyone to stand in while large damage goes out. Sometimes the heal from this alone can be enough to offset the damage taken, but if you need more, you can then consider your other AoE abilities, such as the non-cleric version of Assize, which is equivalent to Medica and Potency, but instant cast, or using one of your 3 spell-based AoE heals. Cure 3 is likely to be a rare choice as it costs the most MP to cast, and does a lot of healing instantly in a small radius. Unless your party is stacked up very closely, hitting everyone with this spell can be tough, and honestly not worth the higher MP cost unless the damage is so severe that you need the instant healing power it can provide. Otherwise, you'll likely turn to Medica or Medica 2. Medica can be great for just topping off players missing small amounts of HP, or in addition to the regen effects of other heals like Medica 2, Asylum, and Whispering Dawn. And since we just mentioned it, Medica 2 is amazing for AoE damage. It heals the most out of any AoE spell in the game over its full duration, and the 30-second regen on their party can really help with dealing with future damage or constant damage. A lot of times, a single Medica 2 will be all you need to deal with even the biggest of AoE damage. Just remember that having this running during ad spawns can be bad unless your off-tank is prepared. Now, we should talk about an important part of the White Mage role, that is MP management and conservation. As a White Mage, it is absolutely vital that you do not run out of MP, as running out of MP will halt heals and result in party deaths, which you do not want. A common cause of this is using the wrong spells to fit the outgoing damage, such as using Cure 2 exclusively for single target healing, instead of defaulting to Cure and Regen. Something to keep in mind is that Cure is your bare bones heal, and in all actuality, it could be very possible to use nothing but Cure to heal an entire instance. Regen is also a special case, since it does so much healing for such a low cost, but other than these 2 spells, nothing else should be casted unless the situation calls for it. These special spells are Cure 2, Medica, Medica 2, and Cure 3. If the proper conditions for these spells are not met for their use to be more efficient than using Cures and Regens, then they should not be casted. These all use considerably more MP than Cure and Regen, and improper or frequent use of them will contribute to your MP draining much faster than it should. Now, even though these aren't heals, Stone Skin and Isuna also count for these special spells, as unless these spells are required, they should not be casted. Only Isuna debuffs that can hinder a person's roll, and only stones get in combat if it is needed to reduce a huge spike of damage or to keep someone alive. Knowing when and when not to use those special spells will go a long way to conserve your MP, but you also have a few tools to help restore your MP. The first and most obvious one is Shroud of Saints, which also has the utility to halve your enemy. Again, I prefer to use this when I know the refresh effect won't top my MP up completely, then use it as it comes off cooldown as the fight progresses, only saving it for certain ad phases where I may pull aggro. The other ability that restores MP is Assize, which gives you 10% of your maximum MP upon use. Now, since you'll likely be using this for damage, you'll want it on cooldown pretty early. I prefer to apply my 3 dots, possibly a regen on the take, and then use this. Doing this may not allow me to benefit from the full MP gain, but this will allow it to go on cooldown faster than waiting for that opportunity, and you may get another use out of it over the length of the whole fight if you're using this on cooldown. Aside from the job's specific abilities, you may also use Ethers, which are pretty lackluster and barely give any MP at all for their long cooldowns. You also have access to Mind Potions, which can be used to increase your heals and essentially save you some casts, maybe. And finally, you have the refresh effects that other jobs can give you. The Bard can sing Mage's Ballad, the Machinist can provoke their Bishop turret, and the Astrologian can place the Era card on you and restore your MP. So keep that in mind, communicate if you may need their help. We've touched on it a bit before already, but we should talk a bit more in depth on DPS and Cleric stance. DPS as a white mage, or any healer, is an important skill that you should learn to improve and push your limits as a supporting party member. Helping deal extra DPS can ease tight DPS checks, or just speed up the pace of any encounter. The amount of DPS you can add to the party can be pretty significant, especially with the new abilities we've received in the expansion. But there is something you should keep in mind, and that is your main priority is that of a healer. Never let doing DPS hinder your role as a healer. This means knowing when to stop DPS, saving up MP for healing, and knowing when to get out of Cleric stance and heal up your party. If your party members ever die while you are DPSing, that is almost usually your fault. This is an advanced step in becoming a better healer, so if you're not yet comfortable with your healing role, you do not have to DPS, though if you really want to be a good healer, it is something you should eventually learn. First off, it goes without saying that you should be in Cleric stance to do the maximum damage. Although if you're not yet comfortable doing so, and are in the learning process, you can leave it off as you practice. Even non-Cleric stance spells can add some additional damage to the party. For single target damage, keeping up all 3 of your arrow spells should be your priority for using Stone 3 as filler. You can also use Assize and Fluid Ore on cooldown, although remember to keep Fluid Ore's knockback effect in mind. For AoE damage, you have Holy. Lots of Holy. Consider using Presence of Mind to deal out more holy spells before enemies begin becoming immune to the stun effect. Usually, you'll want to start off with 1 holy to initiate the first stun, cast arrow 3, and then cast holy more until you need to start healing again, or your MP starts running low. Pairing up Shroud during this time is a good idea to keep enmity down and start refreshing your MP, and using Assize during this time can be a good addition to damage and a nice boost to your MP. Some tips to keep in mind: have stones get up before the pull and regen up while you're in Cleric stance to help offset the damage the tank will be taking while you are not healing. Also, try to plan ahead to use Tetra or Benediction to catch up on heals and to get a little more time out of your Cleric stance session. And, if you need to heal in the next 5 seconds, don't jump to Cleric stance and start DPSing, because then you will fall behind in healing and might just end up getting someone killed. Remember that you are a healer, and DPSing is not a required skill on paper, but is something that people will eventually come to expect from you if you plan to advance as a healer and do more challenging content. Now we can talk about stats and my personal view on their usefulness and my priority and how I want to optimize my gear. Some stats have seen some changes from A Realm Reborn, which I will make note of as we are going through them. Weapon damage is hands down the most important and weighted stat to your healing and damaging abilities. Never sacrifice weapon damage for anything else. Mind increases your healing potency and will be your main stat as a healer. Your 35 attribute points should be spec'd into the stat. Mind will naturally increase with a gear's item level and will be present on all healer gear, so you should never have to worry about this stat too much. Accuracy will affect your chance to hit a target with damaging abilities. Keep in mind that you cannot miss a heal, and this stat is only useful if you're trying to deal damage. Unfortunately, with the new Heavensward gear, you'll lose the small bits of extra accuracy that was present on your old gear from A Realm Reborn. This means that there is actually a feasible chance to miss enemies with your spells, including in older level 50 content, while wearing any Heavensward gear that doesn't have any accuracy. To gain extra accuracy, you'll need to either wear crafted gear and meld on accuracy materia, or eat accuracy food. I wouldn't recommend dishing out the gil and resources for any of these things unless you are really planning to dig into progression and endgame content. For more casual dungeon runs, I wouldn't really bother, but again, this is up to you personally. Piety will increase your maximum MP pool. This stat is awesome, as it affects how much MP you have at the beginning of a fight, how much MP a size restores, and how much MP you passively regen both inside and out of battle. It should be 6% of your maximum MP every 3 seconds outside of battle, and 2% inside of battle. Now, while it doesn't seem like that much, it adds up over the course of a fight, or over the course of time between your next pull. Of course, if you are stacking a bunch of piety but never using the majority of your MP pool, then that extra piety is essentially going to waste. Although, if you're having a bunch of MP left over in a fight, then that probably means you're just not DPSing. Striking a good balance of piety and other stats is still kinda difficult with a lack of horizontal gear, but Just know that while piety can't ever really hurt, having too much will take away from the other 3 choices. Spell speed reduces the cast time of your spells and the potency of your healing over time effects. Now, it does take a lot of spell speed stacking to really see and feel the reduced cast times, but with the addition of the increased potency on healing over time effects, spell speed is still my favorite secondary stat. This will allow your regen, asylum, and medica 2 to be more effective, while also giving you shorter cast times to react to outgoing damage. This stat is great for white mages. Determination increases damage and healing dealt by a small amount. This is a flat and static increase to both healing and damage, and it is a solid stat for any and all jobs in the game. You can't go wrong with determination. Something to keep in mind though, is that the amount of damage increased to auto attacks by determination has been reduced, although as a healer, you probably won't have many opportunities to auto attack anyway. Critical hit rate increases the rate of critical damage and heals, as well as the damage or critical healing done by your critical hits. This stat is still the worst for white mages in my opinion. Critical hit rate is unreliable, as it may crit a heal when you don't want or need it to, contributing to unwanted overhealing, and you can't make your heal crit when you may want or need it to. Due to the way white mages heal, choosing the right spell to fit the outgoing damage, critting your heal can be a bad thing and can cause you to overheal. If a tank needs a bigger heal than a cure, you're going to cast Cure 2 or pop Divine Seal, not cast Cure and hope that it crits. Critical hit rate is unreliable and I don't like it. Although, unfortunately, the Esoteric's weapon has a bunch of crit on it, and sadly we can't switch it for the spell speed that scholars got on their weapon. And those are my views on the stats. Again, optimizing your gear can be pretty tough since there isn't a lot of horizontal progression yet, and therefore not many choices. The highest item level piece will almost always be the better option regardless of what stats are on it. And also keep in mind that your opinions on your secondary stats are completely your own and you do not have to follow my views at all. And it is completely up to you whether or not you want to choose the same stat priorities as me or go your own route. Really, you should be able to heal all content in the game regardless of what your secondary stats are, provided you have the skill to do so. We are nearing the end of this lengthy guide, but before I end it, there are some last tips and thoughts I'd like to share. Know the fights. This is pretty self-explanatory, but knowing the timing of attacks, what each attack does, proper positioning, and when more damage is likely to go out will be pretty important in staying on top of your heals and being able to switch to Cleric stance more comfortably. Know the other jobs. This is really something all players should do that a lot tend to disregard, and that is researching each and every job and learning what they are capable of. As a healer, it is vital that you learn the ins and outs of each job and what their abilities do, as well as what their various buffs and cooldowns are capable of. Learning the movement and behavior of your melee DPS, knowing that your casters and ranged DPS might be trying to be greedy and finish their casts, knowing what defensive cooldowns your tanks are using, and knowing how long it'll be before they come off cooldown again, it goes a long way. This sounds like a lot of work, and as someone who has played each job to at least an intermediate level of mastery, it has come naturally to me. But if you take the time to learn this, you'll find your foresight to be more accurate. You also have no idea how many times I've caught tanks, monks, and ninjas charging into combat without the passive permanent buffs, or machinists who forgets to place their turret. Like I said before, perception is a huge thing as a healer, and you won't be able to make sense of what you see if you don't know what you are seeing actually does. Let healing over time effects do the work. As a newer healer, it becomes quite common for you to overheal simply because you are not comfortable with seeing the missing HP of your party. Regen and Medica 2 are your strongest spell-based heals, both being efficient in MP while healing the most at the cost of healing over a long duration, instead of being instantaneous. Keeping that in mind, let the healing over time effects you place on party members do their work, and don't panic and add more heals just because you are feeling anxious of the missing HP. If the regen effects will be enough to eventually top up a party member who will not need the HP to survive incoming damage, there is no need to add another heal to them, and you can just focus on healing the tank or doing DPS. Coordinate and work with your other healer. This should go without saying, but in content that has a second healer, try to set clear responsibilities for both of you to avoid too much overlapping. This can be things such as healing assignments, who's in charge of dispelling certain debuffs from certain people, and and other things depending on the specific mechanics of an encounter. As a white mage, it often falls upon you to do the bulk of the healing, while skulls usually try to focus on being aggressive in their DPS output. Practice healing with random groups or duty finder groups. While you may find yourself most comfortable healing in your static or with your friends, you won't be playing with them all the time, and venturing into the duty finder or party finder and healing with random groups will help you practice and grow as a healer. Different people have different playstyles, and you as the healer will have to adapt quickly to match with them. And finally, healing is not easy, and honestly, not for everyone. It is the most difficult of the three roles and has the most work and responsibility of any other party member. If your party members are taking more damage than they should or die, it falls upon you to clean up their mistakes and try to salvage the situation. You have to make the most effort to adapt to situations and make snap judgment calls as the fight continues. For tanks and DPS, fights are usually pretty scripted and predictable, and if someone else makes a mistake, all they can really do is focus on fulfilling their own role and responsibility and hope that the other person's mistake doesn't cause a wipe. The healer, however, has the power to save and salvage bad situations and make up for mistakes. No other role or class has the power to carry others like the healers can, and because of this, healers have the most burden and stress as they not only have to fulfill their responsibilities, but make up for others' mistakes. Overall well-being of your party lies in the hands of the healer, and really, it takes strong determination to be a good healer. It is not uncommon for parties to place blame on the healers even when the healers are not at fault. If your party is not handling mechanics properly, taking avoidable damage, or not using their defensive cooldowns properly, it is not your fault as the healer if people start dying and causing wipes. Your party's ignorance to certain mechanics will also cause blaming to start heading towards you. If you want to be a good healer, you need to be able to stand firm and still try and educate people, knowing where mistakes are being made and realizing when things are because of your own shortcomings or if it's because of your party. As you are watching this guide, some of you are probably thinking I was going overboard with tips like knowing all the jobs and paying attention to every aspect of a fight. I wasn't. This is the responsibility of the healer, and it is something that DPS and tanks often don't take into account when they open their mouths to spit blame at the healers. Having healed Final Fantasy XIV since close to the beginning of A Realm Reborn's launch, I know for a fact that people are quick to blame healers and tend not to appreciate them much either. People think that a healer's role is simply to heal, and they are unaware of all the stress and extra work we go through to add every bit of support we can to the party. If you heal, you will more than likely be signing up for a thankless job, and you shouldn't expect much love or appreciation for it. All those commendations you thought you were going to get at the end of a run might just go to the DPS for a quick run, even though you were sitting there DPSing where you could. People might even think you're a bad healer for letting their HP drop so low, but this is a playstyle and factor for dealing more DPS. To add more fuel to that fire, as new, quicker methods of fights become relevant, this puts more stress on, you guessed it, the healer. Speedruns are the most common variation of this, pulling multiple mobs and adding the outgoing damage, or ignoring certain mechanics of fights in favor of dealing more damage, causing more damage to go out for you as the healer to deal with. There's also been an increase in tanks experimenting with wearing less fending accessories and switching to their DPS stances while tanking, which was something that a few tanks, myself included, have been doing since back in A Realm Reborn. However, this is something that takes good mastery of your tanking class, and just like with Cleric stance as a healer, there's a time to switch in and out of it, and to strike a balance between the two. But as most are learning how, or flat out don't know how to properly use less vitality or switch between their tank and DPS stances, it will put more stress on you. This is not a tanking guide, but a good tank should know when to be in their tank stance and how to use cooldowns while in their DPS stance to compensate at the very least. You'll come across many that don't know how to do that. Now, as much of a rant as that was, it is important for you as a healer to know what you'll be dealing with. Despite all the seemingly negative things I just listed, I still love and enjoy healing. I love helping and supporting others and essentially being the heart of the party. And with that closing thought, this is the end of my guide. I hope you're able to learn something and will go on to become great healers yourselves. If you have any more questions or feedback you'd love to give me, you can leave a comment on the video, as I do read and respond to all questions I get. Again, my name is Tsuki, and I hope you enjoyed this guide. If you're on the Faerie server and would like to chat with me or friend me, my full name is Furia Tsukimori. If you like this guide, subscribing would be a great way to support and motivate me to do more of these kinds of things again in the future, because as you can probably imagine, do take a lot of time and effort to make. I mostly play post-gameplay footage on various jobs and content on the channel, although I am thinking of doing an astrologian guide sometime in the near future, perhaps after they receive their next set of changes. At the time of posting, we're nearly at 300 subs, which isn't very much to most, but I consider each subscriber as a personal accomplishment. I appreciate all of you who do watch and leave likes and comments and such, so thank you to all of you. I hope you all continue to have a wonderful time in Final Fantasy XIV, and I hope to see more amazing white mages out there. So thank you, and see you all again.